Hey guys, back here again with a new review, this time from the debut album Different World from house producer Alan Walker. It's been 4 years since the track Fade by Alan Walker blew up off of no copyright sounds, and it was later reworked into the mega smash hit that a lot of us know today, Faded, which happened to also land a spot here on the album today. And so this album, Different World, is a big just mesh of the history of Alan Walker from the past to the just recently in the last few years up until the stuff he's doing now, really showing a big evolution from an early producer really early on into his career up until somebody collaborating with pretty much anybody and everybody they want to. A couple of his big label releases did not land a spot onto the album though, like the tracks Tired and the rework of his other big instrumental Spectre, The Spectre. And on the flip side of that, of course, there were tracks that did, like Sing Me to Sleep, Alone, and of course Faded. The album opens up with this grazing instrumental and vocalization with ever-changing vocals too that just kind of fade in with different effects and however it's a pretty interesting sound. It sounds like the next step in evolution of this big wave of using vocals more as noises than as vocals. But all this happens to some big build before cutting into the first track, Lost Control. And there's 3 transitions on the whole album, and all 3 are pretty beautifully done like this. Probably my least favorite of them is the second to last track on the entire album, the Faded interlude. But it's mostly just because it leads in the Faded. It's not as grand. It's not alone. It's supposed to be with Faded, and I didn't find it to be that great as the other 2. And I do find the names of the interludes and intro and interlude and Faded interlude to be very bland and boring. But really, that takes little to nothing out of the experience for me, as it is just names. But still, having artists that use creative ideas for this kind of stuff is always a nice touch. The second track, Lost Control, featuring Sarana, is a nice kick back into the frequent instrumentation and style that Alan Walker has brought us in the past, and it kind of goes with this big, like a large build and a female vocalist with almost a squeaky high voice, but it's also very polished. However, then the drop comes and it's a bit different as he's kind of expanding his horizons. It's not something completely new and refreshing and great, but it is more focused on that, like the intro, more focused on using vocals as a instrument than as vocals. Typically with his signature sound, he has that very melodic drop to it, but this time it's more based on those vocals, like I was saying. And the way it's produced and made, it makes it sound like it sounds like vocals, but the execution is more brought in like an orchestra or a string instrument. And it's all very stripped back too, so pretty much all you hear is that vocals. Like there is some other noise in the background, but the main centerpiece of it is that. And I'm not sure really how his old fans may be reacting to this, as it is not really like his usual style, but at the same time it is also executed in a pretty good way. So I don't have any issues with it, but I would see how an Alan Walker junkie would maybe be thrown a little off by this. His old classics though, like Sing Me to Sleep, Alone, and Faded, like I mentioned earlier, all do land a spot on here as well, so there is enough classic Alan Walker to go around. And his old sound is really just rooted in more basic white noise, buzz, and synths, along with that signature beep or bleep, or I don't really know how to describe it, but that sound he uses that is very recognizable. Like you hear it and it's just instantly, oh, that's Alan Walker. And you can definitely hear the evolution of it too with his older stuff, like Fade into Faded or Sing Me to Sleep is more based on that kind of just blaring white noise synths. And his newer stuff is a bit more interesting, like Dark Side, for example. The drop really doesn't have anything to do with old Alan Walker, but the chorus and verses totally do. It has a very hypnotic and interesting version of his signature sound. And I really love the creative jumps from song to song that he uses, as it really does still sound like Alan Walker on every track, but he just changes enough on every track too where it's not all the same. I mean, even on his old tracks like Faded, Sing Me to Sleep, and Alone, they all just have a little bit that's different about them, where it's not just listening to the same song just remixed. For example, we'll use Faded as the benchmark classic Alan Walker. And then going into Sing Me to Sleep, it is those same noises used, but they're more lasting and they don't cut off as quick. They kind of just hang around for a little bit longer. And then Alone kind of sort of goes in reverse, where everything's really short, especially on the drop, where it's the white noise and synth is matched with his signature beep, and they kind of go in pair, and it's all just like, he doesn't really take this, what you heard on Fade isn't really going to be heard again on here. Maybe on like the Spectre it is like that on there, but maybe that was the decision, that why he made the decision not to include it on here. And personally, I didn't think Faded was really that fantastic of a track either. I very well prefer the original Fade, and maybe it's just because I heard that song so many times that listening to Faded just sounds a little wrong, and Faded was the actual track of this that was exposed to like the masses, so that they didn't really have a chance to get kind of tired, not really tired, but like used to the track as the original yet. As far as other fantastic highlights, there's like All Falls Down featuring Noah Cyrus, Digital Farm Animals, and Julie Ander, as well as the track Lonely featuring Steve Aoki, Isaac, and Omar Noir. And like I mentioned, he does keep a lot of the same elements throughout all the tracks, like his favoring of female vocals that have that very high, squeaky, clean voice. But he does do a good job including a few male vocals here and there that complement him rather than like kind of kill the mood of it. The only male vocal performance I would say does feel a little odd on here is by Trevor Guthrie, and his voice just doesn't match the tune or the sound of a lot of the female vocals, as his is a lot more gritty, and it's not even a really gritty voice, but just all the other voices on this thing are so polished and clean that his does stand out kind of like a sore thumb, although the rest of the track that he is on is fairly good. And then there's also the track I Don't Wanna Go featuring Julie Bergen, and this track I find the drop to be decent. It's pretty one-dimensional, but it is interesting at the same time. But I found the chorus, and especially the chorus, to just not really have the same style as a lot of his stuff, where typically it's a mix of like gloomy and optimistic at the same time. And this track really just sounds like a tropical Alan Walker track, which would be fine if it wasn't surrounded by all these other tracks that share a lot of the same melodic patterns and such. Alan Walker has continued to recreate his sound to keep every song fun and fresh. While containing his original influences and points, he uses his abilities to expand and work with other people and take what they say and use it into new tracks. So in the end, I'm going to give this thing a 9. So let me know what you guys thought of the album here, maybe what I should review next. Let me make sure to like, comment, and subscribe as always, and I will talk to you guys next time. See ya, bye.